So we're still talking about dinosaurs and fossils, and I really want to show you some treasures that I've kept from when I was teaching. I used to teach earth science, and this was always one of our topics. There are so many fun things that you can find in the earth. So I'm going to read this book to you, but as I'm reading, I'm going to show you some of the things that I brought in. So this is called If Rocks Could Talk, Fossils. And I'm going to have Shannon now come around behind me here so she can actually look down on the book. And Shannon, is this a good view for you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so fossils are the remains of living things from centuries ago. They're the last traces of living things that once buried deep below. These traces may be footprints or just tails or feet. It is rare to find a fossil that's entirely complete. And you're going to be making some fossil imprints. I do want to show you, though, something exactly like what's on this page. Here's an example of some plant leaves that did exactly this. Okay, they are just a trace of what was a leaf had eventually at one point fallen off into this. These are some I found over in Danville when I was kayaking over there. My daughter and I were going along the edge, and there were just all kinds of these. And you can see that this is like a sedimentary rock because it's in different layers. You could almost, I think if I popped this apart, there'd probably be another one down below there, because when I turn this one over, there's more on this side too. So that place was really just full of fossils. Here's another example of a fossil that this fish, this came from Colorado, and this fish was in a riverbed. It died, and as it sank down to the bottom, it just kind of, the soft parts just kind of like degraded, and what is left in this fossil are little teeny tiny pieces of bone. This would be called a compression fossil because these pieces of bone still remain in this fossil. So the little bone pieces have become fossilized. Here's another one of another leaf. This is more of a fern type thing. You can see that. And here's another one. It looks like this one is in coal. So those are all examples of things that, just got buried. All right, I'm gonna move these over for a second so we can look at a couple other things as we read on. Sometimes it's a plant fossil that scientists have found, kind of like what I showed you. Fossils teach us about many living things that are still around. Was this place once underwater? What can we use to tell? One way is if we find a fossil that looks like a seashell. So again, this fish we absolutely know was underwater. I happen to know that these leaves, because they were around a quarry that then was filled in with water, so those were near water. This is a fossil of a snail. And so we know that, well, there are land snails, but we know that those usually are in water. So let's keep going. There are many different ways that a fossil can be formed. Some living things are frozen in place before the earth was warmed. Some fossils fell into tar pits that hardened over the years. Their bones and teeth were hardened into fossils, it appears. Now, I have some bones here that are not fossils, but they absolutely could become fossilized. It is a process, though, that really does take millions of years, okay? I mean, it takes a very, very long time because the bone just becomes calcified and hardened, kind of like what has happened with some of these. So this is an example of, you can see the rock, and you can see how this has just kind of become hardened. Here's another example of something that could, over time, these are definitely not dinosaur bones, okay? They are not. This is from a deer. This is the backbone. And if this laid in the soil and just got covered over and weathered, then the bone could become fossilized. And this is kind of like when paleontologists do find bones on sites, only they are now, this is still a softer, more recent bone. And skulls, which are a little more fragile. This one still has the teeth in it, some of them. Those are an easy thing to fall out. But these are just examples of how bones can then just become fossilized over a period of years. So, some living things like insects were caught inside tree sap. The sap then later hardened, and then ocean water filled the gap. The hardened sap then changed into amber, and the insects were preserved inside the clear brown amber where they could be observed. And amber is kind of like if you've ever been around pine trees and you touch that stickiness, that can harden, and sometimes insects can get trapped in things like that. Some living things were covered with sediment and tiny stones, and this preserved the outline of their body or their bones. Other types of fossils are found inside chunks of coal. Plant remains leave only imprints. Some are partial, some are whole. And again, here's an example of a plant that is formed in coal. And here, same ones I showed you from before. This is part of a plant, a brachiopod, and that just really ended up being a hardened fossilized piece. Okay. Another kind of fossil was made after something died. It was buried in the landscape over years and was petrified. In this case, the word petrified means something turned into stone, and minerals filled in the parts that so long ago was bone. Now, I do want to talk though about petrified for a minute. There's a petrified forest in Arizona, and wood can become petrified. And here is a piece of petrified wood. I don't know how old this is. I got this from my mom. It's very, very heavy, but this tree has actually become petrified, and literally all the openings in the cells have become filled with minerals, and you can see the different colors of some of the different minerals. And when you're out west, there are a lot of different layers of color in the rocks. So this is an example of petrified wood. So sometimes other animals can become petrified, is just when it just becomes a solid chunk like this. And trilobites are something that are fairly common. They're a marine animal. They lived hundreds of millions of years ago. And we know that these are pretty common to find. Actually, one of my students found this here in town. She was walking along the railroad tracks and looked down and found that and brought it into me. And this is just one that I purchased. So fossils are a lot more common than we realize. Occasionally, a fossil is found that has been mummified. This is when remains are found that were completely dried. Some living things were buried, and their remains formed a cast. These are some ways that fossils preserve life forms from the past. So finding fossils helps us understand what dinosaurs looked like, because dinosaurs lived 350 million years ago. We don't know what they actually looked like, but by putting the bones together, we're able to kind of create an idea and a skeleton, and then kind of imagine what the outside looked like. So, all right, well, that's a little bit about fossils. I hope that helped to understand.